So I've used this track before, and the reason I do it is that it's got a really nice blend of acoustic instruments and electronic instruments. So this is a piece of mine called The Cat's Eye from my album, The Road Home. And I recorded this whole thing in my apartment in New York City. So let me play a little bit of this, and I'm just going to go through the mix and how I mixed it with my friend Ken. And yep. Just let me know how the volume is. All right. And it just goes on from there. So I'm obviously playing everything on here or programming a few things. And as you can see, no, I don't have VCA masters on this track because there weren't that many instruments, and so I didn't feel like I needed to do it. But you can see I've got all my markers in here, right, with everything marked up. And again, this really helps me out because if I go here and I show my memory locations, I can navigate this track really quickly. So let's say if I want to go to verse 2, dot 3 dot, and boom, I can play it. If I want to go to verse 3, it's dot 8 dot. Verse 4. Outro. So when I'm doing this, there's a really good reason for doing that. And you see, I showed you what I was doing on the keyboard to navigate there. Can anybody think of why I'm jumping back and forth between all those different sections? Let's say I'm mixing this and I want to make sure this is like a really good mix. Why I would jump back and forth between all those sections like that. In sort
to compare the sounds, to check for uniformity of the mix?
Correct, right? And that's a really great way to do it. And also as you're writing, what did I do in verse 1? Let me listen to that, right? So verse 1, that's my arrangement, right? Oh, I did change it in verse, right? Let's go to verse 3. Okay, so you can see, you can hear the different arranging techniques I use. You can double check how your arrangement unfolds by zipping back and forth between the different sections like that, just to make sure that, like for me, writing a piece of music is creating, and I've said this before, so forgive me if some of you have heard this, a compelling narrative, telling a story in sound. And I can hear, as things unfold in time, I get a sense of that by jumping back and forth between the different sections and listening to verse 1 and comparing it to verse 2, listening to the chorus 1 and the second chorus, and just hearing how I've built up the arrangement, because repetition will, of certain elements of your track is good, gives people something to hang on to. Exact repetition will put me to sleep, right? If you're on a trip, if you're on a journey in your life, you know, you travel from here by car. When I was young, people used to hitchhike. I used to hitchhike home sometimes from Queens College out to Suffolk County, Long Island. Yeah, I take the bus down to Northern Boulevard and get out there with my thumb, and because I didn't have enough money to get home. And it would take me a few hours, but I'd get home. You know, not all the time, but there were days where I had like $2 in my pocket. I didn't have a car. I didn't have enough money for the Long Island Railroad to get back out to my house, or my parents' house when I was living there. And so I used to hitchhike home, you know. But I had friends, and I hitchhiked from Long Island up to Syracuse and Buffalo a few times. But I had friends who hitchhiked across America, you know, and like that's a trip. You're different at the end of that than you are at the beginning of that. Your music should do the same thing. You should be, you know, it should take you on a journey like that as well. So, okay.
Sorry, how do you open the memory location again?
It's Command and 5 over here. Or in the window, it's right here. All right, so if you're using a laptop, you'll probably have to go to here. Let me just see something. No. Okay. Has to be the extended keyboard. That's, you know, I have my laptop over there. I've got a laptop station over there that I do my film and video editing on, and I also have a Pro Tools set up in there. But I have an old extended keyboard from like I've got about 3 or 4 of them down in the basement. So I just hooked one up. It's a wired keyboard, and I use it because having this extended keypad is very helpful in a lot of Russell, the hitchhiking business. It's really important to have this the functionality of these keys. Yeah, it was a bit different time then, you know. I didn't feel like people were different then. It wasn't like you were putting it's funny, I'm living in New Paltz, which is a state university town. I can't believe the number of cars the students have. It's insane, you know. when I was living, I had years when I was going to Queens College. I had a car, but I was commuting a lot of times from Long Island. And one year, my first year that I lived near the campus, I didn't have a car. I walked to campus. Anyway. All right. So let's go through this mix and let's look at some of the things that I've done with compression and EQ. As I said before, I have some VCAs, but not a lot of them. And also, I have all my masters right up by the instrument groups. And I forget why I did that, but that's where they're living for now. So this is my drum kit. Oh, I have one other thing I want to do. Hold on. All right, so this is without. So this is the mix with no processing. Right, let me put all the processing back in. All right, so you see how I've completely changed the sound. So let's look at our drums. So I've got 2 tracks of drums here, and these are programmed drums. I think they're a combination of loop and programming. So let me turn off all of these plugins and the sends. And let's listen to the drum kit first. Right, so that's a loop that I edited up. It was in 4/4, and then I put it into 6/8. And so the first thing I did was I got rid of some of the low end. Then, so some of these processors you don't have, but I'll just talk you through them. So this is a twin tube. This is an emulation of a processor that adds harmonics to the sound. Right, so there's a little bit more high-end activity now. And this is an emulation of a tape, which adds a little bit of fullness. And then a little bit more high pass with a little bit of bump here at 200. And then I added some compression. And so let me turn all these off. All right, so it's a little louder, but it's also a little fuller. All right, and then these are, I played these in by hand. In other words, these are a ride cymbal. I played it on the keyboard. So high pass, and then bringing up some of the high end here. And then you combine those two together. And then on my drum master, I've got another compressor, just doing some light compression. And you have something like this in your Pro Tools plugins. It's the BF76. Let me show you. Right, you can see that it's very similar. This one's black and this one's gray, but same kind of thing. And I'll show you how to use this maybe the next class because it's different than the regular compression. All right, let me get rid of that. And then I just have over here some mallet rolls, just to give some swishes. And again, just getting rid of the low end. Do not need it in the big picture of the mix. So now I'll just leave the drums playing. And the next bit is the bass. Now, the bass is a synthesizer, and it's a combination of two. I played it on the keyboard. It's a combination of two things. It's my mini Moog layered with a fretless bass sample. And so the mini Moog, the fretless bass gives it a singing quality, and the mini Moog gives it a lot of really thick full end, and I balanced the two together and made a track out of it. So I've got this. So that's the sound. Actually, just the bass I'll do. So this is the raw sound. So this first thing does a little chorusing, right? And it just widens the sound out a little bit. And you have something like this in your Air plugins. The Air plugins, you've got the Ensemble, which is a very similar effect. That's too much. You can just bring the mix down. So I could have used the Ensemble, but I've got these expensive plugins I paid for, so I might as well use the right. Okay, so the next thing I've done is I've used this EQ, which is, you might have this, some of you guys might have this in your Pro Tools bundle, some of you might not. So this just adds a lot of warmth and a lot of low end. Fullness. It's thinner, fuller. And then this last thing is compression. And it's barely moving this, just adding a little gain and the color of this. I'm going to talk about the sends in a little bit. So that with the drum, now some of the reason why I got rid of some of the low end on the drum is so that the bass is really fat and full. Right? You can hear how the clarity between the different sets of instruments. So now I'm adding the guitars in. So you can hear with the guitar and the bass, right? They fit together beautifully. There are no clashing in the low note, which you have to be careful about the low two strings on an acoustic guitar when you've got a big, thick bass. You got to be really careful what you're doing. So how did I do that? Well, I avoided playing those notes on the guitar. Just played the top 4 or 5 strings. And I've got a lot of ringing strings, open chord voicings. So, but on top of that, and if I look on my master track, right, I added some EQ, and look at how much of this, even without this. So if I just mute all these guys, right, it's a little muddy now. I don't know if you can hear that over the Zoom. That's better. That's even better. Now the DBX is just another different kind of compressor. Just keeping it smooth. It's barely hitting it. Only in the loudest spots is it moving anything. But it does color the sound. And then the other thing I'm doing, which you won't hear on Zoom, but you will hear if you go to the YouTube, is I've got this thing called Center. And I'm just taking out the signal, that's any signal that might be coming in the center, and spreading the stereo out left and right. Even though I've got this panned hard left and right, one guitar all the way to the left and one guitar all the way to the right, there's still some signal in the center. And I'm just using this to just get rid of it. It's very subtle, but I can, with the headphones on, I can still hear it. Okay, so then next thing up, I've got a kalimba, which only comes in somewhere in the middle here. And it's actually, the kalimba is part of the drum track, actually. So again, I've got high pass. I've got this pan. It's mostly the way it was panned, the instrument. I originally did it so that it was a little bit to the right, but I liked it a little bit more in the center, so I adjusted it here after the fact. And then I'm taking a little bit, second EQ to take a little bit of the mid and add a little high end in there. See how dark that is? That's beautiful if it was solo, but I needed to fit in with the rest of the track. And then, so the first thing I did was I sent it through reverb and then a delay line. It gives a rhythm that fits in with the drum kit. Right, it adds a little bit more drive to that. Right, 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. So it's kind of cool. So I'm using an effect to enhance my playing of my part. All right, so the next bit, excuse me, is the piano. Yes.
I just have a question.
Yep.
Why did you use, I mean, I can imagine why, but if you could explain why do you use different compressor for different instruments?
Right. Well, so these are emulations of vintage gear, right? And typically some of them sound better on certain instruments, right? So the DBX is very punchy, so it sounds good on a certain kind of instrument. The Fairchild is a little different, and it adds a warmth to the sound. The LA2A is great on bass. It fattens it up. This is just, if you like, the more you do this, the more you realize this. So I have the opportunity to use all these things. You don't need to use all these things to get a great sounding mix, but I have them and I enjoy using them. They're fun for me, right? So that's why I use them all. And EQs sound different too. You know, they program that stuff in. Okay, so this is kind of two things with the piano part, right? So the piano part, this is my Yamaha C7. And, right, just cleaning up a little bit of this low mid here and adding a little more sparkle in the high. It's very subtle. And then here, boosting some low end here and some high end again. And then just a little bit of compression so that in the loudest areas, right, you can hear the compression there. I can. So listen to it here. When I click on this brown bypass here, it'll come in. So what ends up happening is that it brings down the volume of the highest pitched notes so you can hear the left hand a little better, right? So it's actually changing what I played the way it feels. It's interesting. So this is without the compression. It softens the right hand and brings out the left hand a little bit. That's the effect. And then I have it going through a hall. Now, this is just an orchestrational technique here, which I think will be helpful if you write stuff, is I've got a second piano, and I've got this felted piano, which I use it a lot. It's easy to overuse. I try not to overuse it, but basically it's a piano that has a piece of felt between the hammers and the strings. And again, high pass, a little bit mid-range, and then it's got its own reverb. And what this reverb does is it makes it feel like it's further away. Right, that's in your face. Further away. It's sort of an illusion. But that fits in with the regular acoustic piano. And notice I'm not playing anything in the bass area because I leave that free for the bass guitar. See how each instrument has its own spot. So my point here is that good mixing starts with good writing. Okay. And this is a melodica that I played here. Right, it sounds weak. This tape emulation thickens it up a little. Yep, just getting rid of a lot of low end. So this is a compressor. It's what's called a multi-band compressor. It's just hitting it in this area here, just smoothing the sound out across the frequencies. And then it goes through this other smooth compressor here. And you can see on this meter's barely moving. But it goes through multiple effects. So it's going through a plate, a doubler, or a delay, and then a doubler, which is just a quick echo. Right, so here I make it sound bigger than it is, right? Just by, like in other words, it's a nice melodica. It's fine. It's a little wimpy. It didn't fit in with the track. I wish I had an accordion, but I don't. So I used the melodica and I thickened it up and made it sound a little bit, I just covered up for its weaknesses. Let's put it that way. Then I've got Orchestra Bells. Now, another arranging and orchestration thing. So I've got choir patch, right? And let's hear how that fits in with the piano. See how I've got that, it's playing the similar thing as the piano, but it's not playing the da, 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 da. It's going ba, 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 da, right? It's not repeating the notes. That would sound really cheap. It's basically adding this like ethereal warmth around the acoustic piano. Right, and when you add the aggregate with the felt piano, and still leaving plenty of room for my bass. Coming up. And the bass comes in here. And my guitar. So you can hear all those instruments because I've carved out space in the mix for them all to fit. And I've also written and played parts in that helps with that also. right? I'm avoiding writing things in that conflict with each other. Now, another bit here is I've got these orchestral strings. And even though there's some low notes in there, I'm not playing, they're not busy. There's not a lot of notes going on, so you could still have your bass. Right, see how they thicken up the bass? So I have low notes in the strings, and the bass is not as busy as it was before, so they can complement each other instead of fighting each other. And then the only other thing in here that's a little unusual is I've got this, my ARP synthesizer here, doing like a fake French horn. And I played this in twice, and I just changed the sound, tweaked it just a little bit on the synthesizer. And see how it just adds a little extra dimension to the strings. And then this is the whole track with that in it. So I've muted the strings and the ARP. I'll bring them back in.